we have some new members this month and last month, and I'd like to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell us all a little bit about themselves. So, Chris, why don't we start at this end with you?
Okay. My name's Curtis Carpenter. I've lived in Indian River County since I was 9 years old. I've been here a pretty long time, probably not as long as some of you guys here, but I was appointed by Randy Old, and I'm looking forward to work with the commission.
To me?
Yes.
My name is Rick McDermott, Richard G. McDermott, Jr. Been a full-time resident of Indian River Shores for the past 16 years. Been a taxpayer of Vero Beach for the last 31 years. That first 15 was 30 days a month, trying to afford being able to come to Florida. I came down here a little ahead of retirement to start the U.S. Trust office on Beachland and A1A, which I did and worked with them as regional president for 10 years till they started to go different ways. And then I took a job as vice chairman of Cypress Capital after that. I'm a father of 4, 2 married, 6 grandchildren, and happy to be on the commission.
My name's Grant Beadle. I guess we've been down here for quite a while. My parents moved down here in 52, 53, and my wife and I moved down officially about 22 years ago. We've had a place here since 1965, and actually we were married in Melbourne, Florida, 60 years ago next month, so we've been around. I've got 2 married children in the Chicago area, 5 grandchildren, all through college and all working. And let's see, 2 in San Francisco, 1 in Austin, Texas, 1 in Denver, and 1 moving to Miami. So we've got a shot at seeing one of our grandchildren anyhow. And I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Is your microphone on?
I don't know, can you hear me?
Okay.
There's a little green light.
Green light on. Push the button in the middle.
Green light went off.
Okay, the green light was on.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm Bill Teston. Came on board about a month ago. My wife and I retired to Vero Beach in '99. I've been a part of the Finance Commission here for a number of years prior to getting off of it. We have 2 children, 3 grandchildren, and enjoy Vero Beach very much.
All right. Thank you. And then, does anybody, any of the new members, live in the county and receive power from the city? Okay, so it looks like we lost our 1 member from the county, other than our Shores representative. All right. Well, then moving on to the approval of minutes. Do we have a motion?
Motion approved. Second.
Any discussion, corrections? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I should recuse myself.
I should too.
That's all right.
Okay. Actually, you to abstain from a motion, and I don't know if they went over this with you, you have to have a reason, and there's paperwork that you have to fill out documenting that reason, so you have to vote. I was surprised to learn that myself a couple years ago. All right, any public comment this morning?
Yeah, 1 member of the public.
Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to new business, the replacement of the sand filter influent gate.
Good morning, Commissioner. Rob Bolton, Water and Sewer Director. In front of you this morning is a routine purchase for some gates that we need in our sand filter building. The gates actually control the water levels that operate the sand filter system. So the replacement gates are actually a fiberglass gate versus the aluminum that was in there. The aluminum has a tendency to pit with the chlorine that's present in the water, and the gates do not slide over time and have now become to a point where they're pretty much frozen in place. So this is for a supply and an install to replace the gates so that we can get better water quality in our reuse system. With that, any questions? Yes, sir.
Does this change the amount of water that you are able to pass through the filter tool in any way, or?
No, the filter cells themselves and the square footage of the cells dictate the amount of water that can be treated through them. All this does is allows us to operate them at different levels, and in some cases we'll shut down some of the filters because underloading the filter sometimes decreases your water quality. So
This is part of the sewage system then?
yes,
Not the water treatment, sure.
correct.
Okay. So it
varies over time.
it varies over time.
The flow rate varies over time.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
You want us to approve this? Is that
Yes.
what you're saying?
Please approve it. It'll be on the
Agenda
council meeting tonight.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve the
Replacement of the sand filter.
That's right, thank you
influent
very
gates.
yes, the contract, the bid that we approve this. Second.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
If I can indulge you 1 minute, I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. McDermott yesterday, and he brought up another issue that I just want to make sure we had at the last meeting that it doesn't cause confusion, and that's when you all approved the step system and the private wastewater systems and the private maintenance. Even when we got to the council meeting, I think that night it was confusing, and I want to, while we're here on the record, make another statement that when we talk about private wastewater systems and maintenance, we're talking about facilities that exist on private property other than step systems. Once the step systems are installed, the city will take over those maintenance responsibilities. So the ordinance that was just passed, when we talk about monthly maintenance and records and all that other stuff, that does not apply to an individual that goes on our step system.
It applies to you, not the...
It applies to us.
you and not...
Yeah, we're responsible for all those things, but it does not apply to the resident. I think that was confusing by us revising the entire ordinance all at one time. There was that ability for people to connect the two together, and it really should not be. They're separate items.
Rob pointed out to me that there's only 150 or so people that are under the
Private
heavy
system.
requirements for maintenance out of 12,000 plus.
Correct.
But it appeared to me when I was reading the information that if 12,000 people had to go through a monthly maintenance deal, it'd be pretty significant.
Correct. Yes.
Only 150?
Only 150 have private systems, so private lift stations, like I pointed out to.
Oh, you're talking about like the condos and
the condos and
not private property, not a
Correct.
single-family residence, in other words.
right. The 150 total includes single-family residents, so a majority of them are commercial. I would say there's just my best guess would be about 25 private homes, or 25 to 30 private homes that have a private lift station on it. And like I talked and mentioned to Richard, that we're going to scale down their requirements, because as a private homeowner, with the ability to control the amount of wastewater that they generate, and if a light comes on to stop flushing, their commode, we don't need to have monthly inspections and everything else on those private residential homes. The language was geared more towards commercial and multifamily, which you now don't necessarily have that full control like you do on a private resident. There still will be a requirement for the private resident to have a contract with some service provider, that they have a phone number that they call for an emergency that comes out and makes the repairs. That was the main issue that DEP was trying to resolve, was that that the homeowner or commercial owner or multifamily complex has somebody available to call that will come out and make the repairs, so that you don't have sewage on the ground. So that
If you got a lift station, that means that your septic tank is above the
in the
house?
cases of the private lift stations on private property,
What do you
there
have a
is
lift
no
station
septic
for?
tanks. They're just a tank with a pump in it that pumps into our force main.
Oh, into your force main.
Yes.
It's not, okay,
Yeah.
they're already on sewer then.
They're already on sewer, but once they get
Okay,
a
I
permit
understand
from
now. I
DE
thought you were
yeah.
talking about part of the step system.
No,
You're
that's
not.
what, and see, that's the confusing part
Yeah,
again, right
okay.
there. So once
Those
somebody
are
hooks
not
up to
on
the step system,
They're going on, they're on sewer already.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of these is actually on shoreline, isn't it? One of the private ones?
That one actually, we took over maintenance because we were going to extend the gravity system throughout Old Shore Drive, and it just never happened. But we maintain that one. An example is the condominium on the other side of the bridge. When you are heading east on 17th Street, the condominium to the left, they have a private lift station. They need to maintain it. There's homes on Riamar Drive and some on Club Drive that have private lift stations. In fact, they're redoing a house on Riamar Drive, and they were going to put in a private lift station, and the cost was either $34,000 or $38,000, and now they're going to be putting the step system in for right around $9,000 or $10,000. So there's a huge cost savings to them. So they've already have been in, and they're wanting to change the design and the permit and everything else for the
Good.
step system.
Good. This is
And Bob, you did clear that up at the meeting, that confusion?
Yes, at our council meeting,
Okay,
I presented it, but just from the first phone call I got from a new commissioner meeting, I could tell they were already confused. So I wanted to make sure everybody here was right on board with it, because the two of them, although passed together, they stand alone. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We don't have any old business. Under chairman matters, Jim, I have a question for you. At the last meeting, Mr. Wright said that they're looking at the cost of mothballing the plant or retiring the plant versus the electricity we need to purchase is about a wash. Because we're looking at $2 to $3 million a year in capital expenses going forward. And I had asked Tom, and I CC'd you to give me the information that was provided to Mr. Wright to make this analysis. I have yet to receive that.
I'll follow up on that. I think a lot of it is more speculation, and we did zero it out in the fact that that was our best estimate, but we don't have any way. One of the problems that we have, and I think this was explained, is that we did not project capital improvements into the power plant going forward. We had very minimal amounts of money over the next 3 years, or actually 3 to 5 years. And the theory is that we knew that we were going to abandon the power plant. And so we did not do any major capital inventory in order to come up with numbers. And so when Chef was looking at trying to figure out when we take the plant offline, what is it going to cost us for transmission plus replacement power? Because that's in essence what we're doing, is buying capacity from another third party. We left that as a zero-sum game as opposed to what would go. That did not include, well, it included $3 million, I think, what he put in there for capital investment, but we did not have any projects per se because we just did not look that far out. The assumption is the plant was going away. So, I mean, whatever numbers, and I know that Tom did some. Mr. Chairman, to be very honest with you, they're going to be artificial. I mean, the theory is that we know, for example, we have taken Unit 3 offline. It's no longer in service. We just invested a little bit of money in Unit 1, but it's back up and running. We did the major improvements or overhauls on 2 and 5. That was that $3 to $4 million investment. Those type of investments can be assumed, but we did not budget for those going forward. So, for example, the 2 and 5 overhaul within the next 10 to 12 years, we would have to do that at a minimum again. But a lot of things that are smaller numbers, for example, we just did $200,000 worth of work to Unit 2 that was over and above. Those were bearings that we had to take out. And let's use that as an example. In those bearings, there's like 4 of them. You can only take one out at a time, or it takes the whole unit and then balances it. So we've sent one to Orlando to be repaired when it comes back in. But that's a $200,000 expenditure that is really sort of customary in order to keep the units going. So I think we can get some numbers. I know I can get some numbers from Tom, but they're not numbers that I would take to the bank in any stretch.
The $200,000, that's already in the $4.1 million, and we have budgeted for.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is part of the capital plan.
And we're not required to keep 1, 3, and 4 operational under the terms of our contract with OUC.
That is correct. Unit 2 and 5 are the only thing that are under contractual agreement. Unit 1, which is the smallest unit, unfortunately happens to be the most readily available unit that we have as it's standing right now. So, but you're right. Right now, the only 2 units that we are required under contract is 2 and 5, and that's the replacement capacity we have to buy for.
So capital expenditures with respect to 1, 3, and 4, I wouldn't think would go into this calculation at all.
Well, Unit 3 it did not, but Unit 1 and 2 would because...
2 and 5.
Unit 1, 2, and 5, and 4. Even though they're not in the contract, another little issue that we have, and one of the things that Tom and I have been trying to work against, is that if our 2 and 5 go offline and we don't have the transmission capability of pulling power in here, you could go through some issues. So 1 and 4 really stand as a reserve, and I think it's for our own peace of mind that we have capacity that we can pull on. It does not violate, if, for example, when we took Unit 3 offline, we did have to let the power pool know that capacity was no longer going to be available, and we did notify them, but we, under contract, are not required to have Unit 3. So there wasn't much of an issue there. But 1 and 4, even though OUC has no control over it, the power pool could have some questions. But it, again, more because we have not done the transmission study to say what kind of capacity we could get in here, and that's what we're asking for now, is to try to figure out what is the capacity needs that we would fall short if 2 and 5 were offline. And it was at a peak time, and as you know, we're both summer and winter peak being
when will that
highest.
be done?
Which one?
The study.
The transmission study.
The transmission study. We're still, the answer to the question is I don't have a time frame on it yet, but we've been asking both OUC and Florida Power and Light for that. And there's a lot of documentation that has to go in. For example, we have to designate where we're going to get the capacity from in order to ask for the transmission study, and that's what we're lining up now. You just don't do a transmission study for east, west, north, and south. What you have to do is say this is where we're going to get our power from, and then the transmission study is site-specific as to where that capacity would be coming.
Okay, now for the new people here, you might tell them what power can number 1, 2, and 5, and 4 do? What's their output?
It's right at...
no, each one.
I don't have those numbers with me right now.
Okay.
But I can get those out to you.
Okay, yeah, if you can have...
we'll get those capacity numbers out to all
they might
members.
like to know that.
Okay.
So I'd just like to clarify. So Unit 1 is up just as basically a reserve. Unit 1 and 4, you're saying?
That is correct.
Okay,
That
so
is
5 are contractually obligated to keep up.
That is
Okay.
correct.
I'm new. I need to.
Yeah. That is very true. And what it is that the issue when we sign the contract, OUC is required to give us capacity minus what 2 and 5 generate.
Okay.
And that's how, and when you see our contract now, I think we went to 96 megawatts that OUC owes us that they have to provide to the system. And so, and then our obligation is what the other 2 units can do. Now, for example, this past year, OUC contracted to sell power to the Southern Company off-grid. So they called us, we were able to turn our units on, and we made a couple of dollars because we turned them on, not because of our needs, but because they found a buyer for some of the capacity.
So was that off of 2 and 5, or was that off the reserve units?
2 and 5,
Okay.
and I think we turned everything on
Okay.
at that because whatever we could
produce, we wanted to send out there so we could.
That is correct.
Make profit.
But we don't have the right to sell that. That has to come through an OUC agreement.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, one thing that came up subsequent to our meeting is my discussions with Mr. Wright, and I'd like you to expound a little bit on this. When we met with the OUC, we had the OUC gentleman came here and went over how the capacity charges were calculated. We had asked you to go back to OUC and have them look at it again. And you did, and so why don't you share what the outcome was?
Well, they did reduce some of the forecast, and I think it was just, a minimum number, but and as I recall, I think it was like 5 or 6 megawatts that they did take off, but they revised their forecast. One of the things that OUC does is they do a forecast for their system, and then they do it for us, and the combine of what their obligations will be. And I think what the chairman is saying for the folks that are new on here, every year we pay a capacity charge under our contract to OUC. Whether we use it or not, there's a capacity charge, and they reserve X number of megawatts for the city's use for that full year. And then when we use those, we pay for the energy charges of that capacity. So on any given month, there will be $1 million charge, and that's saying that we have 96 megawatts in reserve that they have to provide us at any given time. And so that is one of those fixed costs that you hear about under our contractual agreement with that. But they did bring the megawattage down. When they do their forecast, obviously, as any forecast, it's predicated on some assumptions, and they use like 100 different assumptions and factors when they come up with their capacity. It's a computer program, sort of like Social Security, I guess, and they plug those things in as to, because we're a degree day type of use, any growth in our system, any type of commercial or industrial demand that may be created by new additions, and they try to look at building permits that have been issued in our service area. Those are the type of factors that they look at when they do the projection as to what our capacity needs will be. And this year, and each one of those megawatts cost us money on an annual basis, just actually on a monthly basis, just to keep it in reserve. And that's revisited every year, and they start giving us some numbers around the October time frame in which we can discuss, as we did this time. And fortunately, the Utility Commission was sort of the lead arbiter on that. And so when OUC came in, they made I thought, a very good presentation of how they arrive at their projections, but at the same time opened the door for us to be able to negotiate some of those numbers down.
And Mr. Wright, when he expressed it to me, and what confused me for a little bit when we were talking, he said we renegotiated, and we don't have the right to renegotiate these terms, but we did ask them, and they did take another look at the calculations and changed the amount. So that's going to lower our cost the coming year.
That is correct.
And
yeah, the contract's pretty specific that OUC does their projections, and in theory, we have to assume that they are correct in what they're doing unless we can show some other cause of action, which means you have to go out and hire somebody to go over all their factors, which typically does not have any financial return. But fortunately, they have been able to sit down and were willing to sit down and talk to us.
And it was a good presentation, and I might recommend to the new members that they find that online and review that. Because it is a major part of our cost that it's not part of what we look at when we look at the cost. And Jim, I have some graphics with respect to our entitlement contracts that I've shared before, but I'll get those to you just so that you'll have them and you can pass them out, because we get power from our 3 entitlement contracts, plus we get power from the OUC, and then if we need power, then we generate power here.
But we've had no problems with this arrangement.
Other than cost, that's the only thing that's been the real debatable issue is the cost factor. And just for the new members, and I've said this several times before, you got to sort of put in perspective of when these contracts were drawn up. And in that 2006 to 2008, where you saw a high demand going for capacity in the state of Florida, people were building everywhere, and there were a lot of second and third homes being built, as well as commercial activity. Somewhere along the line, I'm sure that the city of Vero Beach said, capacity is a critical factor to us. We need to go into long-term agreements in order to lock in capacity, because at the same time you had discussions, we don't want any more power plants on our peninsula, and it's sort of what California did. And so we signed a long-term agreement, and we had a previous long-term agreement with the FMPA. So a lot of the thought process at that time was that capacity was as critical as pricing. At the same time, you had a fuel mix that standardized everywhere, and including the state of Florida. Coal was a big part of that fuel mix. And at the time, they just, the electric utility industry assumed that coal was still going to be a vital part of the generation of power. And so when the city of Vero Beach, I presume, signed on to this, having coal as part of your base mix was not a major issue. And so we bought into a couple of coal plants. In the meantime, we've started seeing changes in the way that we as Americans want our generation created. And you see companies like TVA, or you go up into the Northeast and you start seeing where they're just taking coal plants offline, air quality issues being the primary driver of that. And so we're now changing our fuel mix. Then you had fracking that came along that drove the price of gas to a point that nobody ever envisioned. And we happen to have the largest utility in the state of Florida surrounding us, who happens to be very dependent upon gas prices. And their price has gone down. And so we're sort of surrounded in that area. You go over to TECO as an example, and TECO had fortunately taken some of their very old coal plants and converted those to gas. And so they're taking advantage of some of that in the old days that people thought TECO was crazy for doing it, but their plants had gotten to an age that conversion was something that was financially feasible. So that fuel mix is what really put us in a situation really within the entire state of Florida as to where our pricing is so extreme on one end and extreme on the other. And then you have Duke Energy, who entered the game and inherited a nuclear plant that created that has a crack in it. So they've had to put into their cost structure reimbursement for the taking that unit A offline, but the B is to put it into storage to try to figure out what we're going to do in order over the next 40 to 50 years of that unit. So the Duke prices have skyrocketed, and it's just a totally different industry than it was in 2006 to 2008. And so and here we sit. There's no question that in today's world, doing long-term contracts is probably not the wisest thing that you could do. And we can see on the market, because when the demand went down, the supply stayed basically the same. And as in all markets, the supply is out there. It's marginal cost. Lake Worth took a real good advantage of that, and they've been able to get at least, and theirs is a 5-year contract, but it's really only guaranteed for 3, and then there's 2 one-year options after that. So people are now trying to realign as to what is going to be in the future as the economy picks up, and if you don't put new generation online, obviously the supply will start moving in a downward path and the demand goes up, price has the same reflection.
Yeah, gas, when this contract was signed, gas was $11 a therm and going up, and now it's about $4. And it was about 2 years later that it dropped, which is unfortunate for us.
Yeah, and then the regulatory environment changed with respect to coal.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's really nationwide, but it affected us greatly.
So our 2 and 5 are a natural gas that we generate based using natural gas in 2 and 5.
That is correct. Our units are really natural gas or oil. It's either one you put on. Oil obviously has not been a fuel of choice for a long time now, but they are natural gas. The issue we have with ours are the age of the plants and the technology that is used. We do have an asset sitting there, though. It's a power plant siting that is permitted. It has the capacity of being reworked, and you could put new technology into it. But at this stage of the game, having a merchant plant in that particular location is not really something that is in need, and nobody can make money off peaking plants anymore. So you have a challenge. But if demand goes up, supply goes down, it is a permitted site, and obviously new technology could make it much more efficient. But when you have 40 and 50-year-old units, it's pretty tough to try to compete in today's market.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think what I owe you is capacity output of our units.
Yes.
Now, didn't you also ask?
And I'm going to give you some information, a nice graphic that I have. I think you've seen it before.
Okay.
I know you've seen it before, but of the capacity of our entitlement.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And perhaps if we could have just what the current cost from each one of these sources are, the all-in per megawatt hour cost. So that would include with OUC the capacity. Sometimes we get just the cost of the power without the capacity charge factored into it. So, and just the most recent invoices. I mean, I'm not asking for a big analysis, but just maybe if Cindy could pull out just 1 month recent invoices. This is what we paid last month for all of our different components of power.
As a matter of fact, I just signed one of those yesterday, so we'll pull their most current billing and send that out to all the members.
Just so
that way, give you a picture of where we are.
Yeah. So no, this is what we pay for OUC power. This is what we pay for Stanton 1, Stanton 2, and the St. Lucie.
We also on that bill we got, the demand charge and the capacity charge and all the rest of them. It was all itemized, which is very useful.
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, it's on me.
But if the staff could do the division and just give us also one number per unit or per entitlement package, and then because that's and then one of the unfortunate things is that they do economic dispatch across the state. And so when they decide whether or not to run Stanton 1 or Stanton 2, and often over the last few years, one of them has been shut down, they do that based on what they call economic dispatch, what's the most efficient generation of the power that meets the demand. That's economic dispatch across the whole state, not for Vero Beach. Because when they shut down one of the coal plants, we still have a significant cost in our fixed costs to bond payments and just the fixed cost of the plant. And so it can skew our economic cost and puts us in the economic cost across the whole state can be subsidized by the cost, the charges that come to Vero Beach. So that pushes our power cost up in those situations. Sometimes we pay an awful lot to Stanton 1 or Stanton 2, and we don't get any power at all.
So I have a question. Mr. O'Connor is going to provide us with the most recent statement, but that's basically just a snapshot in time. Are there going to be any instances, like you said, where possibly one of the power plants was down and our cost went up? Basically, how can we assume a year-long or a long-term what everything is costing us with simply one bill? Wouldn't we need more than that to kind of aggregate?
Well, we have
the
what
numbers?
I'll refer you to is the rate sufficiency study that Cindy does quarterly.
Okay.
And it was the month before last.
Correct.
The last one we had, and that gives us a running total.
Okay.
Sherry, if you don't mind, will you send that to each member? And also, just so you know, that we are doing a rate study, and we're also doing a optimization study. We've hired the contractor for the rate study, which is going to get down into the weeds as to where some of our costs lie and what projected rates. That's just now getting started. The optimization study will have even a broader view of that as to how our operation works. And we'll have those firms be making presentations to the Utility Commission so you can ask questions and see up front what we're doing.
We, several years ago, we did an optimization study of the water sewer system, and that has led to some significant cost savings as we've gone forward, and we've been implementing those recommendations, and they've been really good. So I'm looking forward to this optimization of our electric utility. Hopefully, we'll have the same positive benefit that we did in water sewer. So those are my questions for you. Any other?
Coming back, Curtis, just so you know that we are weather dependent, and so any given month you can take it over a period of 5 or 6 years, and it'll vary as to what really is taking place. And that's one of the challenges that you have in the electric utility business, is that we have to gear our purchasing from that we acquire from OUC based on what that peak would be in any given year. And so it's sort of a challenge as to how that works and plays. But I think you're really correct. Now, those monthly or those quarterly sufficiency studies can give you a picture as to what we have done over that 1 quarter of a year. But you got to be careful not to be misled. The fluctuation changes.
That's all I was worried about, was that we'd get a quarter where we had, either costs were extremely high or extremely low, and now all of a sudden we're basing a lot of our information on, let's say, hypothetically, the numbers were through the roof, and when we're basing a lot of our information on these numbers that are really high, whereas in reality they might be lower or vice versa. It's all, if you're comparing your electric bill, you don't just look at December's bill and think, I'm only spending $40 a month in electric. Meanwhile, in June, I'm paying $140 a month. Or, you get what I'm saying? So it's nice to have a few quarters or a few months or a few bills to kind of create an aggregate.
And that's why I asked that it be divided by megawatt hour, so we see what they actually pay per megawatt hour, not for the total.
And that's a good analogy. Your home utility bills, like what we receive as well, and it is one of those fluctuating deals. The other thing, and the chairman brought up, we are an economic dispatch, and that's how we do it. But sometimes you'll read where Stanton 2 is going to be $150 a megawatt. A lot of times OUC will price their production at a very high number, not wanting to turn the plant on. And then the other one, you'll see Stanton 1, that'll be $78 a megawatt. And you'll know that they want to run that plant, so they're putting it into that pricing mechanism that'll turn it on. The other thing is either one or the other, the Stanton plants have to run because it's a no-discharge site, and you've got a gas behind it that is the Southern company, but their output is contracted to OUC. So, if the world was right and you could just do away with everything, you'd probably just use the Southern company unit because it's gas. But because it's a no discharge, they've got to run the Stanton plant in order to push that discharge through their stacks. And so that's another minor complication, and sometimes you got to watch where your numbers come down. Sometimes they're put out there for a different purpose other than that's what it cost me to produce the power.
Wouldn't it be good to get a bar chart of these charges, maybe perhaps over the last 18 months? And you could see the peaks and the valleys on all these different charges, as opposed to just 1 month or 1 quarter or 2 quarters?
We
I mean,
have
just go back over our bills and put them on a bar chart?
we can.
We did. I got a printout from the plant by hour as to how much was used, and they did it over almost the whole year. And it was interesting because we had peaks at the weirdest times,
Yeah.
and maybe that's what you'd like to see.
Well, I can see, Jim, this analysis spread out over 12 to 18 months would be useful. But what I don't want to do is to make the request so complicated that we don't get timely information going forward. So if we could just have a very simple snapshot of time and then develop perhaps the bar chart by entitlement over the last 12 to 18 months.
I have another question, Jim. Doing the rate study, if we lose a major portion of our customers, that's going to have a significant impact on the rates, isn't it?
That is correct. We have fixed cost, and those fixed costs now go over 34,000 customers. If we had only 20,000 customers, our fixed cost really does not change. So it would go over a smaller number, i.e. the price per unit would go up. But yes, if there is a change in the customer base, then it does reduce some costs. For example, we're not consuming, and in theory, the OUC contract would go down proportionately. Our FMPA contract, we're locked in. It's take or pay, but it's a base load. And even if we lost a significant percentage of our customers, that would take our base load. And the unfortunate part is, on the pricing, and I think where the chairman's coming from, is our OUC pricing is cheaper than our FMPA pricing on any given period of time.
Well, that is the information I'd like everyone to have.
Yeah.
Just and just to at the risk of I want to explain what take or pay is, just because it's a term of art. With our contracts with the FMPA, they generate power. We have to take it or we pay for it. If we don't use it, we still pay for it. So it's the total of those 3 contracts is approximately 41 megawatts a month, or is it a day?
I thought it's a total of per day of the megawatts. Yes.
Yeah, and which coincidentally happens to be about 40% of our load, and the outside customers are about 60% of our customers. So it's not quite 60% of our load, because we have some differences between industrial users and some large users. So, but those probably close enough that you would look back if this partial sale was forced upon us, we would not need to buy much power from OUC, if any at all.
Yeah, supplemental power is the first thing that would be taken away at that point. But, just to make sure we all understand, so we're playing on a level playing field here, in the electric utility industry, you make long-term investments predicated on your customer service area. That customer service area is given to you by the state, negotiated typically, and that service area is what you predestine, what you're going to serve for the next 100 years, as long as you're in the utility business. So you go out and you purchase, and for the case in Orlando, Orlando has an awful lot of customers outside the city, but they've invested in the Stanton 1, the Stanton 2, they've invested in the contract in the Southern Company's facility on their site. And if they lost 60% of their customers, they still have that debt service, they still have those plants. And that's the type of system that you have in the utility industry is you make long-term commitments in order to provide for a service area to meet your commitment. In the electric utility, as it is in water and sewer, we don't have the option. Do we serve Herb and not serve Rick as an example? We have to serve anyone who moves into our service area and says, I want a meter. And so it's an obligation to serve as well as an obligation to make sure that you have the capacity available. And the service, you've got to be at a utility standard. You can't say, well, I can't serve because we don't have a utility pole there, we don't have a line. You have to put that line in order to make it work. So it just so we all have a big picture of the type of and the magnitude that we're talking about in the business that you are now becoming a part of.
I got just a statement for everybody. First, for our customer base, we only occasionally change the rates, if I'm correct. And so we absorb these little month spikes that we get that go up and down. So the customers don't see that change every month, but it does affect our cost, and sooner or later we have to change them. Another thing is that, what is it, FMEA is the organization?
FMPA is who we have.
The Florida.
The Florida Municipal Power Agency is who we buy power from. FMEA is the Florida Municipal Electric Association.
Florida Municipal Power Agency puts out every month, if you go on their website, fmea.com or .org or something, a chart of all the utilities in the state and what their prices are and how much is fixed and how much is regular. And that's pretty interesting because it shows where we are, not just against FP&L, which has been a real problem for us because they are the lowest by considerable, but also against all the utilities. And I think the last time I looked, which has been a couple of months ago, we were just under the 50% line. So we're not the highest in the state by a long shot. We're not the lowest. I'm not sure if you know exactly where we are on that now.
We're just almost $2 maybe above the state average. We're right into that game.
We're pretty close to the average.
Yeah, we're very close to the average.
And that site's worth looking at.
But again, the utilities across the state, they fluctuate. The people who were low at one time are now high. Those who were high at one time are low. And I think every utility, if you went and looked at them, you can see where they've moved along that bar chart as to where they are in their rate structures. The other thing, just again, it's more of an informational tool. A lot of times when you look at electric utilities and we keep pacing at the 1,000 kilowatts because I think it's 1,050 or something that's the average residential consumption in the state of Florida over a year's time per month. But we use that 1,000 kilowatts as our measurement tool. But in the rate structure, which will be coming to you all when we do this rate study, because we're going to be looking at the structure, you've got demand charges, you've got different types of charges that go into the electric utility. And an example would be is the hospital. They are not on a typical meter. They have a demand charge, and their peaking is similar to the way we price ourselves with the OUC, is that there is a peak demand that they have to pay for, even though that they may come down from that peak demand at any given time, but it sets a rate structure for that. And so some of our large customers, and then you get into your smaller commercial customers who may also be fluctuating in that same thing. And Florida Power and Light, as an example, they even have on some of their larger residential customers a demand meter. And they put in, because what they've done is establish a threshold as to what the average consumption of that customer would be, and then anything above that is a demand meter. That may be something that we will have to look at, because we have some very large consumers that happen to be in the residential classifications. But those type of things fluctuate. it's easy to say the 1,000 kilowatts, and that is a very good because virtually everybody in the state uses it. But the rate structure is really different depending on which customer classification you actually fall into. There's nothing that's simple about you're going to pay, $2 a kilowatt. It fluctuates depending on how your consumption design goes.
And more than half of our residential customers are at 1,000 or less.
That is correct.
So it's a good number for us to
It
work
is.
with as well.
Yeah, our average residential customer is somewhere in the neighborhood to 800 to 900 is
Yeah,
what I
and
recall.
I'm thinking it's 60%, but I do know it's more than half.
Yeah.
What we do too, if I can just correct me, Jim, I'm going to summarize how we set our rates for the year. So correct me if I misspeak here. At the beginning of the budget period, we have to budget and forecast our demands and our cost. And we have to maintain, contractually under our bond agreements, we have to maintain a certain reserve, a certain cash reserve. So we put all those numbers in together, and so we forecast our cost, we forecast our demand, which translates into sales, and then we set the numbers to maintain the proper reserve. And one of those numbers that goes into the mix, of course, is the transfer to general fund. This year, we then are reviewing these numbers quarterly as we get actual numbers and looking forward. Keep refining the numbers on a quarterly basis. We do a rate sufficiency study. This year, the year before last, we underestimated the cost. And so we had to make that up by increasing the rates. This year, we've overestimated our cost and perhaps underestimated our revenue. And so we've been able to lower the rates going forward and still maintain our reserves. And that's been the cause of these two rate reductions that we've had in 2014. Notwithstanding any politicians that claim it comes from a change of political will or anything that we've done to improve the system, optimize the system. It's just been a factor of actual has been better for us than the budgeted, and so we've passed that on to our customers as well. We should, and we can continue to do that. So if it was 2 months ago, we're probably a month out from our next rate sufficiency study, December or January. January, and then staff will make a recommendation to the city council and presents it to us into the finance of what they project the rate needs to be going forward. And then we'll discuss that. We'll meet with them. We'll go over the numbers, and either we'll agree and make the recommendation to the city council that they accept staff's, or we'll disagree, and staff will take it to city council anyways. So that's what is going to happen. So
it really gets down to the basics, as the finance director reminds me. Revenues have got to exceed expenses. And so that's just the nature of the business that we're in.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Jim, I don't have anything else for you. Does anybody else have any questions for the city manager?
We'll try to get this information out to you, and if there's any other questions, please let me know, and then whatever documents we have will be available to you all.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any members' matters?
Yeah, I would.
Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me, Mark. Some public comment.
I've been standing there so long I look like wallpaper.
I wasn't going to say it.
Mark Mucher, 617 Indian Lilac Road. I had the chairman said he was confused. I was confused 30 minutes ago, and I still have a couple of issues, but I do have a pet peeve, and that's average rates. And I've said this before to you guys and the council, and I want to say it again. Those average rates that are published by FMEA are absolutely worthless. They take Florida Power and Light, and they take one of the little, it's not a co-op, but it's a tiny investor-owned utility that serves Fernandina Beach and Amelia Island, and they average them together. So they're equally weighted. My point is, those averages are unweighted and therefore absolutely worthless. So I hope I'll never hear about average, that we're above the average or we're below the average. They say that 4 out of the 6 investor-owned utilities are higher than we are. That includes those 2 little tiny ones, and it includes either Duke or one of the other ones. But at 1,200, anything above 1,000, they're lower than we are, just because they have a very high fixed customer charge. So those things aren't true either. So look at any claims like that with a grain of salt, and FMEA are paid lobbyists for the public power industry, and their job is to lie and make sure that they look better than they really are. And that's where those averages, and that's where adding franchise fees to Florida Power and Light and not adding municipal taxes to Vero and other municipal utilities, they do that as well. So they're really skewing things and basically spinning out of control. But the 2 things I was confused about in the beginning were, first of all, units 2 and 5 were, I don't know whether this is the right term or not, but overhauled less than 2 years ago. And since then, their average availability has been way down. I don't know what the percentages are, but probably much worse than they were before they were overhauled. And I was very shocked to hear that we had a fairly expensive and major downtime item in these bearings less than 2 years after the overhaul. Plus, we had the catastrophic deal with Unit 5. So that leads into my second point of confusion, and that is, I understand the decision has been made whether we, I guess we will have to modify the OUC contract, or whether it's according to Chef Wright's recent renegotiation or not. Our plan is to shut down Big Blue as soon as possible. And I was listening very carefully to what Jim said, and I think I heard that a formal request of Florida Power and Light to do a transmission study has not been submitted yet. And that's obviously the long lead item or the first step in the critical path to shutting down. So I'm hoping that request for a transmission study will be made soon, if it hasn't been already. Thank you.
Jim, yeah, have we clarify again where we're at with this transmission study?
What we're trying to do is that we have not made the formal request for the transmission study, but what we're doing is identifying where we're going to get the capacity from, because that will determine where the transmission study is done. Example, if we buy our capacity from OUC and we're taking it from the north, the transmission study is going to be in that factored up there. If we're going to take it from FP&L or from the south, then your transmission study. This is what I understand, and so we've got to identify where we will be taking our capacity and trying to get to that source. Tom has been working with both the T&D people with Florida Power and Light and the T&D people with OUC in talking about what is going to be the most economical direction to take the power. And that's what we're trying to figure out, as opposed to doing a transmission study that nobody can afford to do the transmission work on. But as you know, I think it was $7 million is something that was estimated by Florida Power and Light in their transmission upgrades if we come from the south. So, and Florida, or OUC has indicated that they may not be able to meet a full 58 megawatts coming down, even on their system. So they are running some numbers on that to see what they can do.
Doesn't the proposed revisions to the OUC contract assume that we're going to get those that capacity from OUC?
That is true. It is part of the discussions that we're having at this time. We have another meeting tomorrow, just so everybody knows, in which we're going to go back over some of those. We've heard from the community as to some of the concerns, i.e., transferring some of the assets, the length and the term of the contract that we have, and some of those issues of trying to rediscuss and revisit those with OUC as to what we can do in order to address those concerns.
Meetings with OUC?
That is correct. Mm-hmm. And it is with their attorney as well as their chief operating officer. Assistant chief operating officer, not the...
Okay. Thank you again, Jim. Herb?
Yeah, I have a question, and I have a problem with Tuesday mornings, and I know Grant has a problem with Tuesday mornings. I'm wondering if we could move this meeting to Wednesday morning, and talking to Rick, if we could start earlier and do later, and talking to Tammy Wednesday morning, the second Wednesday of the month, this room is open. So I have a question of everybody else. How do they feel about that?
I might have a St. Ed's Finance Committee meeting, as I thought about it, on the second Wednesday of the month.
In the morning?
Yeah, 8:15.
I've got Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month dialed into my schedule now after 4 years. So I'm very comfortable with it. I would prefer not to change it.
Anybody else? Grant, what's your...
Well, no, I've got a major conflict on Tuesday mornings, but and I tried to find out from Dick Winger exactly when this group met and that type of thing. So I'll have to wrestle with that. A couple of things that I've locked in. But anyhow, I mean, I'm the new guy on the block, and if you guys want Tuesday mornings, that's
normally it's the second Tuesday of the month that makes.
Yeah, it
doesn't make any difference to me. Yeah, it's Tuesday.
I can personally handle either Tuesday or Wednesday. I would have a preference for an earlier, say 9 o'clock meeting, which we used to be a long time ago. Getting it out of the way is preferable. It also gives us a little bit more time if we do get into a sticky or lengthy discussion.
I second that. Earlier the better. Any day's fine.
All right, you want to start then on Tuesday at 9?
We want to put it to a vote.
with that.
Yeah, we could do that.
All right. Unfortunately, I'm going to be gone next Tuesday, or Tuesday the 9th of December. I'm going to be up in Orlando. Because we also need to have a reorganization because we've lost our vice chairman. And we usually reorganize, in December?
Yes. Yeah, you'll have election of officers in December.
Okay. That's all I have.
Okay, anybody else?
Just a question. Have you agreed that you're going to have it on Tuesday mornings at 9 o'clock, starting at 9 o'clock?
Yes.
Okay.
Chair, do we need a motion for that? Or-
That's fine.
Well,
You're
why don't we
okay.
take a motion so we can get a vote?
I think.
All right, you want to make? I'll make a motion. We have meetings at 9 o'clock, starting at 9 o'clock on the second Tuesday of the month.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes.
As I say, I'll be gone next Tuesday, the 9th of December.
Okay. And we'll miss you. We'll see you then in January. With that, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, so we're adjourned.